Hi, I'd like to welcome you to week 3 of the St. Aidan's Institute course on liturgy. This week, as we come into our reading on the Reformation, we're going to see a lot of very powerful forces come crashing into each other. On one hand, we have the political movements that were afoot. We start to see the rise of the modern nation state as we understand it, and we get to the point where the monarchs of these countries decide to either support the Roman Church or the Reformers, depending on what is to their greatest political advantage, rather than for any theological reasons. France, Spain, and Portugal stay loyal to Rome because they see it's to their advantage to do so, especially in the case of France, where the French monarchy exerted tremendous influence and control over the papacy. In Germany, on the other hand, where the modern nation of Germany had a long way to go before it would rise, you still had a lot of small principalities and kingdoms, and for them it was to their advantage to side with the reformers so that they would not have so much meddlesome interference from Rome. England early on decides to stay very loyal to the church, and it later becomes to Henry's advantage to declare himself as a leader and to pull away from Rome. And so in the national level of spiritual life in the Reformation, a lot of it was political and the will of the monarch or the prince rather than anything to do with the theological understanding or insights of the people. So that's the political angle in all this. Another piece of this is the rise of the scientific revolution and the emergence of lots and lots of new technologies. Perhaps the most important one for us is the printing press and the role it had in disseminating new ideas and disseminating the thoughts of the reformers way beyond the control of what the church could exert at that point. And so we have the rise of technology and its influence. And then finally, there are the theological developments and the work of the reformers themselves. Luther, having been an Augustinian monk and a professor at a school, looked around and just saw lots and lots of corruption and wanted to root out each piece of it as he encountered it. And because of his own spiritual journey and his realization of the power of grace, really focused dramatically significantly upon issues related to justification by faith. That was a reflection of his own journey, perhaps more than anything else. With Calvin and the work he did, he wanted to throw everything out and almost start over. And in the writings that he developed and in the life he tried to build in Geneva, the perfect society he had hoped to establish there, he worked very hard at building a completely different understanding of the faith. And then in England, the reformers wanted to side partly with the Protestants, partly with the Roman Church. They had to be very mindful of the power of the king. Thomas Cranmer did a phenomenal effort at trying to juggle the desires of Henry versus his own desires at reform. And it wasn't until after Henry's death that he was able to complete the 1549 Book of Common Prayer. So we have the work of the reformers and the impact that they have. So as we go into looking at the questions for this week, there's two kind of bigger picture questions I'd like to look at. There's probably 40 questions we could discuss. But the two that I focused on, one was the question of the role of the priest. It was very different in the eyes of the Protestants versus the eyes of the Romans. And getting an understanding of what those differences are and how Anglicanism came down the way it did on that issue is very significant for us, especially because each of you is seeking holy orders. So it's an important thing for you to understand the Anglican distinctives on the understanding of the priesthood. The second question relates to music and liturgy, and we don't do nearly enough to really deepen our understanding of the role music plays in liturgy, kind of the history of liturgical music. A lot of people consider that its own subspecialty and completely separate from liturgy, and that's unfortunate, because the two really can go hand in hand. And so the second question is to try to get you to reflect a little bit on that and the impact that has had. So two very divergent questions, but two very important issues for us. And I really look forward to the way you guys are going to wrestle with it, because you've done such a phenomenal job so far on looking at other questions. This is the last week you're going to have of heavy reading. We'll be finishing the Foley book. From here on out, the reading is going to lighten up somewhat, and you'll be able to spend more time wrestling with the questions we're looking at. So keep up the great work. Have a great week. God bless you, and I will see you in the classroom.